Okay. Good morning.
Morning.
Today is March 8th, 2004, and we are conducting this interview for HistoryMakers. Please state your name.
Richie Jean Sherrod Jackson.
And can you spell it for us?
Richie Jean Sherrod Jackson, Jackson.
Good.
That's okay, as long as you're still name and stuff.
Okay. Okay. Your occupation?
I am a retired school teacher.
And your date and place of birth?
Mobile, Alabama, August the 30th, 1932.
And your educational background?
Well, the elementary, the high school, and Alabama State University, and the University of Monte Valor, with ending with a master's degree in extensive work in education.
Okay. With us, I'm your interviewer, and my name is Donna Elam, and with us we have your videographer, Scott Stearns, history maker, Larry Crow, and Reggie Poe and Jason Poe of Metropolitan Teaching and Learning. And we will begin. What was life like for African Americans before the Civil Rights Movement, and specifically for you?
Before the Civil Rights Movement, African Americans in this country were born into racism. So you knew from Jump Street what you were supposed to do, how you were supposed to act, and what limitations you had on what you could and could not do. You knew, quote unquote, your place.
So, before the Civil Rights legislation was passed, what were you forced to do against your will?
I don't know whether you can say it was against our will. It was against the grain. But you were supposed to do certain things. You had grown up doing these things, so it was just understood within the community or within the home or within the country what you could or could not do. And that was what you really attended to do.
Okay, can you give us some examples?
It was not that you were comfortable, because you knew that there was another side to the sheet of paper. And the writing on the other side was totally different. But the limitations where Afro-Americans or blacks or whatever we're calling ourselves today, we could or could not do. So you work within those parameters if you were going to be law-abiding, even though you knew that the law was not totally justified.
Okay. Do you remember your very first personal experience with racism?
Being born into the situation, I can't really identify any one specific thing or incident. Mm-hmm. But I can recall when I was in high school, and of which I did in the District of Columbia, I was going back and forth from Selma to Washington on the train. And I ran into a white lady who had a store here, of which we used to buy clothes from. And whenever we'd go into the store, it was always, "Hello, how are you?" And when I saw her on the train, it was totally a different attitude. She completely ignored me, and I knew that she knew who I was, but she totally made it a point to let me know that she was out of her environment. So I was completely ignored. And that memory jumped in my head for some reason this morning.
And did that continue to have an impact on you?
It had an impact on me when I came back, because I don't think I bought as much from her as I did before.
Okay. Tell us some more memorable experiences or encounters with racists and racism.
I want you to look at the situation in the South during this particular period, racism was everywhere. It was rampant. It was not just an isolated incident here today, and on Wednesday another isolated incident, or the next day some smear. This was a way of life. This is what you lived and breathed every day, 24 hours, 7 days a week. So nothing was isolated. It was a way of living.
Did you think it would ever change?
As you grow older, you begin to wonder if there is not another way of doing things. And once the advent of television came into bloom, you saw that there were other people doing other things, and there were black people doing other things in other parts of the country. So, and then in traveling, you saw different venues. So there began to creep a little bit of hope.
Did you think that you would always, did you feel that there was something morally wrong in America when it came to racism? Or did you think that, even though you saw it in TV and as you traveled, did you think that it would correct itself or that something had to happen?
After a while, you begin to realize that things evolve. Periods in history evolve. Sometimes there's a catastrophic incident or some movement that will change history. But history is a gradual evolvement, and you always hope for the best, but sometimes you never get the best.
When did you feel that you personally could actually change or help change the racist policies, behaviors, and practices that you saw and you faced?
Well, you know, just in every home or every community or every family, you always have the I wish list. You always have the we could do better list. And I'm sure in my community, in my family, we had the I want to do list and we could do better list. And you strive to do what you can with the admonition that you have to do it with. And one person is not all the time empowered to change a whole attitude. So you have to really be careful of what you do and how you do it.
And how did you do that? What role did you play in civil rights?
My role was totally a behind-the-scenes role. I was not out on the street. I was not during the marches. Mine was more of a logistical sort of support system. And without a foundation, not even bread will rise. So if you have that foundation, and that's how I would see myself, as the baking powder that helped the movement to rise.
That's great. In the marches, you were a behind-the-scenes person. What kinds of things were you privileged to know about in the logistics of the marches and the planning of it? Can you share some of your insights with that?
I considered myself more or less just a flower in the wallpaper on the wall. You saw, you heard, you felt, you knew. But all of that had to stay within the confines of wherever you were, of the wallpaper. And I knew a lot of times what was going to happen before it hit the street that it was going to happen, because the arrangements had been made in our home. The discussions to or not to do had been made in our home. So a lot of the times I knew what was going to happen or the ideas behind what would happen.
Mrs. Jackson, were there specific strategic plans? Did things happen by chance? Was there training involved that you were aware of? How did all of the pieces come together?
As I look back and I see, yes, there was training in terms of the types of people that Dr. King brought in to work with the people in the community and to organize people and groups within the community to do specific tasks. Then I think you could call that as training. But in terms of long-reaching schooling, no. It was a spontaneous, wonderful groundswell of reactions to dominant ills that have been in our community for years and years and years.
Why Selma and why then?
Because God wanted it that way. I firmly believe with all my heart that Dr. King was put on this earth with a mission, as I think that all of us are put on this earth with a mission. We sometimes fulfill the mission, and sometimes we don't, because sometimes we make the choices not to do some of the things that we may have made a contribution from by not making the right choices. Because I think God gives us the ability to make choices. Dr. King was put on this earth with a mission. He did and performed and accomplished what he needed to accomplish to fulfill his mission.
Since you were behind the scenes and you provided the hospitality for so many people coming through Selma and staying in Selma, what do you think caused them to keep going were they fearful with the threats? Did certain things happen that you saw, and how did they keep going on? What motivated them?
Fear is an awful demon. And sometimes when an issue or a situation is at hand and you're so involved in that situation, sometimes you have to pigeonhole or you have to pocket fear and say, fear, get thee behind me. I'll deal with you later. And you have to do, because you're so caught up in what you're doing and the reason why you're doing it, until you don't have time to deal with fear. I didn't deal with fear until after the movement was over. And then I awakened and said, well, you could have been killed. Your house could have been bombed. Your child might have never seen the light of day again. Look at what you've been doing. And I said, phew. Then I got scared. But I had made my contribution then, so I could deal with fear. And I could tell fear, you didn't stop me.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Were there low moments in the movement that you felt like you wanted to give up, or that you saw that this may stop here? Do you remember any times like that?
I was always so busy doing either washing and ironing and cooking and cleaning up and greeting and making appointments for and seeing to this dignitary and finding out what this one could or could not eat or whatever, until I just didn't have time to look for weak points. I was always so hopeful because there was always energy. There was always that move forward energy around me. Now, yes, I did see moments of depression. I did see moments of where do we go from here. This program or that situation didn't work. But I always saw somebody there to pick up and say, well, if this didn't work, let's do it this way. Or we'll get out there and see what will work.
In the history books, we see a lot of reference to you and your husband named because so much was done in your home. Are there any things that you'd like to share with us about that?
Jog him and jog him and jog him and try to wake him up and try to wake him up. And it didn't bother him if it was King Farouk. If he was asleep, he was just asleep. And I would get him awake to the point that I felt that he was, to a point that he would recognize the voice. And he and President Johnson would talk and talk and talk, and President Johnson would be trying to convince him not to march or to march or not to do this, or what he had, what powers, you know, he could help him with or what he couldn't help him with. And sometimes I'd go back just to check. Is what I'd hear, and then I'd have to say, Dr. King, wake up. You still talking to the president? Oh, okay. Yes and no. So intimidated when you have a center, when your family gives you a center of self-confidence. There isn't a whole lot out there that you're not prepared for. And my family did instill self-confidence. You are who you are, and you make of yourself who you want to be. And you want to be what you can be if you give the ability to do it.
Do you see families instilling that sense of confidence
No.
today?
Oh, no. Everybody's now, I do my own thing. And that's impossible.
What would your
We're
recommendation?
all interdependent. We're all interdependent.
What recommendations do you have for the youth of today?
First, look back and find out who you are. Even if you're only 5 years old. Find out who Mommy is, who Daddy is, and listen to some of the stories that Grandma and Grandpa have to tell, or even some of the senior citizens in your community. Listen to what they have to say. Because down the road, you might be able to use their words of wisdom, and they are words of wisdom, to help you. Listen, know yourself, and you can only know yourself by knowing those around you, your ancestry. Dig them up, find out who they are, what contributions they made. And it may not have been anything but turning over a shovel of dirt, but that shovel of dirt may have been the foundation for a school.
You are powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
That's very good. That's excellent.
Okay.
So, just trying to
The only thing he came back and we asked him about the, you know, there was a...
Replied to Donna. Even
I'm
though
sorry.
it wasn't
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Crow.
I thought you were off the air.
Well, no, we don't want to miss getting it on tape.
There was so much controversy about that particular trip, both inside and outside. So I was really being a little nosy about the trip. And when he came back, I guess my questions were, you know, a little bit nosy. But anyway, he did show us the beautiful watch that he had been given, you know, and all of the accolades and what Coretta wore, you know, and what Juanita wore, and, you know, how late they were to this because of that, you know. It was important to him that he had been recognized in such a manner. It really touched him. It really did. But here again, the softer side of him took it in stride because he had a mission to complete.
Did we win the civil rights movement? I mean, or how much more is there left?
Oh, there's a lot to do. Seg is not dead. Live and thriving. He may have put on a different suit, and his makeup may be different, but his roots are still there.
What's our role today, and what issues in civil rights need to be emphasized?
To a point we as a people have come unglued. I don't see us with the passion behind a mission. We have become fragmented, and we're not working toward a common goal anymore. And I don't think that the goal is defined enough. We can say economics, but how many of us understand economics? I'm talking about the total us. So we have a long way to go. We don't have a common thread.
Do you think we'll get there?
I'm hoping. At this point in time in my life, I'm still hoping. We've come a long way. We've come a long, long way from where we were in the 40s and the 50s and the 30s or what have you. We've come a long way. I can go into buy, I can do whatever I want to do as long as it's within the law. But there's still feelings there, and it's still being taught. Hatred, and I'm better than you, is still being taught. And it's being taught from the time a baby says, whack. And we have to start, when our children say, whack, we have to start teaching also. And I don't think we're doing that anymore the way we used to.
That's great.
So where are the front lines of the struggle now?
There are no front lines as I see them. There need to be some kindness. We need, and it should come in the school system and in the home. That's the only place it can start. We have to teach our children to be softer and more understanding. And we have to teach our children to be tolerant. But we're so busy segregating ourselves into smaller communities until we can't see the big community. Now it's the Latin Americans or the Mexicans or the Cubans or whatever. They are getting together and they have their thread. The Jewish community, they have their religion and their thread. The other groups, the Irish Americans, they have their root and their thread, their religion. We don't have that. We don't have a common language. We don't have a common religion. We don't have a common thread. So when we come together, we have to have a movement. And we don't have that. You can't point to any one thing in the Afro-American community that would draw us together other than to say we're black. And not all of us are black. I wonder why.
Now, I have another tough question for you. What was it like for you when Dr. King was assassinated?
I was hoping you weren't going to ask that one. It was if a brother had been hurt or killed, it was if a part of us had been torn away. It was if you could almost feel some of the pain that he felt because we had pain. Even though we knew from Jump Street that it was a possibility of this happening, he even knew it. He knew that there was a hit out on him. If you listen to his speeches, he all but told you. So I was deeply hurt that I had lost a brother, a confidant, a friend.